packet into the front of her riding jacket and tightened her grip on the reins. Behind her, the troop came pounding up, forming around her as they again fled on. She glanced back as they rounded the next curve. Two of the troops were taking up positions on either side of the rocks. MacFarlane was freeing their horses, shooing them on. Then they swept around the curve, and he was lost to her sight. She had to ride on. He'd given her no choice. If she didn't reach Bombay and deliver his packet, his death, his sacrifice, would be for naught. That couldn't be. She couldn't let that happen. But he'd been so young. Tears stung her eyes. Viciously, she blinked them back. She had to concentrate on the God-forsaken road and ride. Later that day, East India Company Fort, Bombay. Emily fixed the sepoy guarding the fort gates with a steady, direct gaze. "Captain MacFarlane." As the niece of the governor of Bombay, visiting her uncle for the last 6 months, she could ask and expect to be answered. The sepoy blanched, olive skin and all. The glance he bent on her was sorrowful and compassionate. "I'm very sorry, miss, but the captain is dead." She'd expected it. Yet, looking down, she swallowed, then lifted her head, drew breath. Fixed the guard with an even more imperious gaze. "I wish to speak with Colonel Delborough. Where may I find him?" The answer had been the officers' bar, the enclosed front veranda of the officers' mess. Emily wasn't sure it was acceptable for her, a female, to go inside, but that wasn't going to stop her. Edie, the Indian maid she'd borrowed from her uncle's household, trailing behind her, she mounted the shallow steps. Moving into the dim shadows of the veranda, she halted to let her eyes adjust. Once they had, she swept the veranda left to right, registering the familiar click of billiard balls coming from an alcove off one end. Several officers, in groups of 2s and 3s, gathered about round tables, and one larger group haunting the far right corner. Of course, they'd all noticed her the instant she'd walked in. A serving boy quickly came forward. "A miss?" Transferring her gaze from the group to the boy's face, she stated, "I'm looking for Colonel Delborough. I was informed he was here." The boy bobbed. "Yes, miss." He swung and pointed to the group in the corner. "He is there, with his men." Had MacFarlane been one of Delborough's men? Emily thanked the boy and headed for the corner table. There were 4 very large officers seated at the table. All 4 slowly rose as she approached. Remembering Edie dutifully dogging her heels, Emily paused and waved the maid to a chair by the veranda's side. "Wait there." Holding the edge of her sari half over her face, Edie nodded and sat. Drawing breath, head rising, Emily walked on. As she neared, she scanned, not the men's faces. Even without looking, she knew their expressions were bleak. They'd learned of MacFarlane's death, almost certainly knew the manner of it, something she was sure she didn't need to know. But instead, she searched each pair of broad shoulders for a colonel's epaulets. Distantly, she registered that in common female parlance, these men would be termed impressive, with their broad chests, their height, and their air of rugged physical strength. She was surprised she hadn't seen them in any of the drawing rooms she'd visited with her aunt over recent months. Another captain, blonder than MacFarlane, and 2 majors, one with light brown hair. She had to tug her gaze onto the other major, the one with rakish dark hair. Then she finally found the colonel among them, presumably Delborough. He had dark hair, too. She halted before him, lifted her gaze to his face, set her teeth against the emotions surging about the table. She couldn't let them draw her in, down, make her cry. She'd cried enough when she'd reached her uncle's house, and she hadn't known MacFarlane as, from the intensity of their feelings, these 4 had. "Colonel Delborough?" The colonel inclined his head, dark eyes searching her face. "Ma'am?" "I'm Emily Ensworth, the governor's niece. Recalling MacFarlane's instructions, Delborough's hands and no others, she glanced at the other 3. "If I could trouble you for a word in private."